See that rust coming off? And that's why having a cloth is useful, to wipe it off. So you can see your progress. I don't know why this ring spear seems to have a line of metal where it's shiny, and then the rest of it brown and rusty. But I can't comprehend what's happened there, and I've not tidied that up. So perhaps when it was being stored, it's had oil on that and it's dripped down. I don't know if you can see it, this little shiny line. But never mind, it will soon be all shiny. And I'm definitely going to have to sharpen this one up. It's also got a little bit of paint on the end and dust from when I painted my garage about 7 years ago. And I'm glad it's not too sharp because, you know, I don't want to cut myself. And I don't want to really use them for anything. I want them to be nice and shiny on camera. Like we'll slide it like this. There we go. I hope this is not unlisted. No, I've got somebody. Hello, I'm derusting a spear. I'll show you on camera before you disappear. I'm panicking now. By the time I get the camera, you would have gone. There we go. So I'm just derusting. Oh, you have gone. Typical. That's bloody Loki. That is. If I ever meet Loki, I'm going to kick him that bloody hard in the balls. He's going to know I'm here. And he'd be going, ah, braggy! You know, I mean, sod Thor, he can queue up. I'm going to kick Loki in the balls at Ragnarok first. You know. I'm sure Eggle will be there as well. There'll be a massive queue. You know, sod the battle. We'll all just queue up to kick the crap out of Loki. Kicking the crap out of Loki. It's a wonderful time of the year. You know, when I'm doing this, it's like I can hear a tune in my head. It's like, I'm just cleaning up a spear before you disappear on me. This spear is very rusty. It's a ring spear, and I'm sure you agree. I mean, that's longer than my forearm. So imagine that going through you or into you. I mean, even with you're back again. Even with chainmail, you know, that'll be quite brutal. So, you know, you're thrusting the spear at somebody, and I would not like to be in the receiving end of this. Even with mail and a gambeson and a jerkin, that will probably go through. Even though at some point, I think we was playing with it and we kind of dumped it, you know, knocked the end off. So I got to regrind it at some point. But if I don't get many people joining, I'm just going to make a video instead. This could be an ASMR video where I just don't talk and I just grind away the rust by hand. Let's have a bit of a wipe. Oh, somebody's back again. Hello! So I'm cleaning up this spear. It's very rusty. I thought I'd just do a live stream whilst I'm A, I'm in the mood, and B, I've got the time. Not, I'll be editing videos and watching a bit of TV. Perhaps we can give you a close-up look. Could be more interesting for people. You know, you can actually see what I'm doing. There we go. You'll just see a dismembered body on camera, then that's me. Then what I do, I like to work my way along and just keep working. Sometimes do some nice long strokes. It definitely needs it a little bit more up here. But it's getting there. You mean you can start to see the shine coming through, which is rather nice. It's a very, very nice spear, which I brought from Eggle. Oh, got to be 15 years ago. Eggle used to use the axe more and the sword in combat. He wasn't much of a spearman. Eggle just wanted to go to the battlefield and just die quickly some days because he's just too knackered. So yes, I am derusting. I am here. This is me up here, and I'm just down here. So I am just derusting a spear head. And if nobody likes this video in a minute, I'm going to go and watch TV instead. But you know, it's the way it goes, isn't it? But you know, today on YouTube there's been a few gremlins. I've seen comments of there, not there, and then they no, I'm not polishing my shaft for OnlyFans. No. I won't get much for that, would I? I'll move the camera back a bit, and then you can see what I'm doing and see me on camera and not be thinking that I'm on some kind of an OnlyFans quest of you know. And then I did meet a guy. No, I met a woman who was on OnlyFans, and she was trying to get me to come and edit and film her videos. And I said, no, it's all right, thanks. You know, it's not my cup of tea. Anyway, let's go back to your comments. Yeah, so I thought you was, you'd be skint for sure. Yeah, I would. You know, I think I'd be looking to get a fiver. You know, $5. No, we make serious content. Oh yes. Yeah, so Edward Thomas says, why is there only 3 people? You're so underrated. Yes, well, I think partly because I've not done a lot of live streams. So YouTube, I think we've been a 9-year history, which will be this year in June the 17th. We've only done 98 live streams. So I think that's one of the reasons, is the fact that we've not done a lot of live streams, because I sometimes find them, you know, quite mentally draining, and because I'm always filming or editing, and then I got to find there's little time for myself to do other things. And you know, I live in a large house with a balcony, and you know, it's you know, most people come round my house and go, you know, bloody old bragger, you live in a mansion. And I said, no, not really. I mean, I got friends who own mansions and they're big, you know. But yes, I think as a channel we are underrated, and perhaps trying to get back into live streaming on a regular basis would help to get more viewers, because it is slightly frustrating when you see you got 13,000 subscribers, then you get like 12 people on a live stream. At the moment we've got 3, but in one aspect I don't mind that, because I don't really want to get to the point, well I do, but I don't get to the point where there's 1,000 people watching and then I could never read your comments. Because the day when that happens, the day when we do blow up and we have 100,000 subscribers, which I think one day we will do, you know, maybe in 10 years, grinding away, you know, there'll be 10,000 videos on the channel by then, I'm never going to be able to cope with the comments. I mean, I find it difficult as it is now, so I have to try to be clever with comment replying. And I know in the last, I've gone back 4 months, so at least the last 4 months of comments I've gone back and answered. But I've not gone back and answered the comments on where they've had a comment, I've commented and they commented back. So I've got to do that next. But certainly, if you go back, you know, the last 18 months, there will be a number of occasions where I've not answered the comment. And yeah, so this is a ash shaft, and it's a good old, probably 20 years old. In fact, at some point, this head probably needs to come off, because the woods over time has shrunk and it's slightly loose. I can get a little bit of play. I don't know if you can hear that. So yeah, there's probably about 5mm of play. So this needs to come off. There'll be another job. It does have a nice rivet on. It's a good thick rivet and a nice dome on the end. This is an old nail, I would think. So that's the nail head. That's the shaft, and somebody's actually gone and riveted over. So this used to be Eggle's spear, and you know, at one point in his life when he was really poor, you know, he said, well, would you buy my spear off me? I don't use it, I don't want it in my life. And I said, oh, I'll give you like 60 quid for it. So yeah, it does have a wobble. It's got, you know, I'd recommend, I'd say I'd say it's about 5 to 10 millimeters in wobble. But you imagine that, you know, charging at you, that would go through your mail, especially if you've got a really good thrust. And don't forget, you know, it's a very long handle, so it reminds me of that Laurel and Hardy sketch where Stan Laurel comes on the camera with a plank on his end, and then you see him at the other end. Classic comedy. So when it came to the wood, so Solomon Riemann says, what was the most common wood did the Vikings use for weapons? Well, in Scandinavia they would also use pine, because pine was very slow growing and made good shafts. But you could also use hazel. So hazel was coppiced, and hazel's very good for shafts, and also ash. And they also had the ability to find a branch which is a little bit wobbly, and they could slightly heat it up and then straighten the shaft. And I saw this in a video a few months back of a guy, which I might have a go, get some little bendy shafts from some hazel, because I do know where lots of hazel is, and you know, have a go at and I think it's raining, let's stick with that on my nose, and have a go at doing that. But you know, hazel's a great material, but I prefer ash. Ash is by far the best wood for handles and for spear shafts. And you know, back in the day, 20 years ago, you was paying about 20 to 30 pounds for a shaft that was handmade. So I don't know how much they'll be now today. There must be people that supply them. So Brad says you have to take your spear to a blacksmith to fix them. Well, actually, I've trained as a blacksmith. I did farrowing, and I've got a few courses, and I kind of studied under a blacksmith. So I do have 3 forges, but it doesn't need forging. It just needs reattaching back on the shaft, and then the shaft just wants reshaving and having a better fit. Because what's happened, because it's, you know, 20 years old, the wood has shrunk. So back in the day, this would have been quite firm, but now it just needs redoing. And this is what happens with old shafts. They do dry up, and they do shrink a little bit, and because it'll probably not the most close as a fit. And then what's the person has done, they've kind of put a shoulder on the shaft rather than being a straight cut. If it had a straight cut, it will fit much better. But because it's got a shoulder here, and then it's being probably turned on a lathe and worked, then that's why it's not so good fit, because it's limiting. It can't go back any further. So it wants completely redoing. I'll have to probably chop this section off, and then on my wood horse I would figure out how deep this hole is, which would be around about probably that there, I'd say, and then calculate it on here, mark it off, and then start wood shaving it, which I will do on camera for you. And we will actually get a nice nail, because I like nails, because they're good quality material for rivets, and rivet this back on. Don't forget to give it a like as well, the old live stream. And then I'm just using some 80 grit sandpaper, and I'm wearing old clothes, because I don't like to do it in my biking clothes really, because you know I'm going to get them rusty, and I don't often wash them apart from my undertunics and my trousers now and again. And yeah, I am gonna make a video on how you can wash in a washing machine your medieval clothes safely without having them damaged and shrunk. Because you know, I met so many guys over the years, and oh, you know, I bought a new pair of wool trousers and I put them in the wash. My wife did, you know, and she put it on 90 degrees and they've all shrunk. So, you know, you got to wash them correctly. But let's just look at your comments. So, yeah. So Brad, no, I'm not an OnlyFans, and I would be skinned. And Edward Thomas, lovely to see you on here. I think as a channel we are highly underrated, so you know, YouTube need to pull their finger out and actually recommend us more, but we are doing quite well. I think at the moment I've done 700,000 views in 4 weeks, so that's good, but that's only because I started putting more content out in March. And then yeah, Brad says, I think after 1,000 comments you can't answer all of them. No, not until we get more self-automation through AI. When in the comments on YouTube, a little box comes up, but then you can sometimes select that AI comment. But because the AI on YouTube doesn't know who I am because I'm not taught to it like ChatGPT. So if I got the same comment and a ChatGPT reply would be more detailed in lining up with who I am, because she knows, or it knows, a lot about me, because we were, you know, she helps on the channel. So because and it'd be lovely if ChatGPT was embedded into YouTube, but because of the fact that the AI with YouTube, it doesn't get to know who you are. It doesn't analyze your content really. So it'll just give you a generic text, and those are normally like a sentence or 2 sentences with normally some form of an emoji at the end. And then, so when I sometimes reply with comments with ChatGPT, then I will dictate through speaking what I want to say, and then it will write it up for me. So by doing that, I can keep up with the comments, but they will get to the point where you can't answer all the comments, so you're going to have to be more selective, and it's a shame really. I mean, imagine if you got 1 million subscribers, you know, you could never, you know, you'd have to have somebody to do that for you, wouldn't you? You know, hire somebody. And whenever I do this, I always end up, my body moves, you know, I start still, and then before I know it, like, I'm doing this. Wobbling. It's not only me that, it's not only the spear that wobbles, it's also me. Yeah. But let's give it another wipe. I've got an old golf rag. And then I'm going to put a little bit of oil on, because when we do this we can then see the rust, and I hope it shows up, but it's getting better. I mean, I should have done this a good while ago, and I'm glad it's not too sharp, because if it's any sharper it will cut my hand. But when I buy some melons and some pumpkins in the autumn, I'm going to definitely demonstrate, you know, how this is effective, and I'm going to figure out a way to get some posts in the ground, so I can like put melons on the top, and then get my sword and chop them in half for you. And then maybe invest in one of those. I definitely want to buy a cheap and nasty helmet, or maybe 2 or 3, which I could test, and maybe buy a cheap and nasty chainmail suit, and maybe find some really knackered tunics and a gambeson or something, or a bit of leather, and test these out on chainmail, whether it's buttered mail or riveted. So it's a frustrating thing when you're not making revenue from the channel, you can't put the revenue back in. And I would put the revenue back in, because in the long run I'm not going to need the revenue, but the channel does. And this is going to take quite a bit of work, but you're going to see on this side already it's better. So, you know, it's just a matter of keep having a go. So you're doing a little dance. No, I can make up a song for you quite easily, you know. There was one out today with the Dane axe, which is just a song I made on the spot. And then the other day when I was filming, I made about 4 or 5 little songs about beating up Saxons, and I just come out with them because I got the ability. You know, if you name a song, then I could if I know how the song goes, then I could sing as I sing. I will make it up and make it rhyme, because I've always had that ability to do that. I'm a Viking and I'm grinding my spear, grinding my spear, grinding my spear. Trying to think of the next bit now. If I meet some Saxons, they'll get the pointy end. They'll get the pointy end. Oh yes, this would be really good for Saxons, wouldn't it? They wouldn't away when they see this, you know. But imagine there you are at Stamford Bridge and you're the lone axeman, and this comes up from underneath and goes into your groin. Oh good lord. Oh, I prefer just to have my arm chopped off and die that way, rather than having all my groin chopped to bits. Not a nice way to go. This is very good for practicing head banging. You can get some Metallica in the background, or a bit of you know, I don't know. I'm thinking now of heavy metal bands. I like Iron Maiden, one of my favourites. And then I've also got a few other things. I've got a massive saw I need to clean up. So I've got this bad boy. Look at me and check that out. Although it's not Viking, it's 19th century. But I want to use it in my garden. And another thing I need to clean up is my draw knife. So let's do a little bit of a play with this. So it's a draw knife for drawing on. This is a knife, not Viking, of course. This is a more modern interpretation from the 19th century. Although draw knives fundamentally haven't changed. I suppose you could rework it, take the handles off, re-straighten the handles, and make it more into a Viking one. But well, this needs de-rusting as well. I just love it when you see all that dust flying off. It's brilliant. And then Brad says, hang on, isn't that a hunting spear? Well, yes, but I've got another one here. There's another one. I forgot all about this one. This is a little bit cleaner. And again, the rings are for hunting, but also ideal for hooking your camera and knocking your camera over. And if you've got a shield, then you can hook shields with it as well. But not only that, legs. You know, you could really pull somebody's leg back with this. And, you know, if you're going low down and you're putting that leg back and very sharply as well, so you know, really yank it, and that person's going to get unbalanced. And then of course you go down and stab him, and then you find the next Saxon to go and kill. I mean, reenactment makes it look rather easy, but I don't think it would have been. You just do this and not talk and call it and make it into an ASMR video. You know, ASMR cleaning your spear. 5 hours long. How many times did Braggy nod? Every time I nod my head, hit it. Ow! And I guess the other reason why the live streams aren't brilliant, because I don't really like create a notification about it. They're rather spontaneous, you know. I'm rubbish at sharing videos. You know, I can talk about weapons all day. I could tell you a story, make one up on the spot, but I can't share the crap out of my videos. I'm really rubbish at sharing. So I've always said along what we need is a Northworthy subscriber army to share the videos out. You know, go to your Facebook groups and Reddit and Hope. So, you know, if any of you guys ever want to kind of organise yourself into, you know, a sort of Northworthy, you know, notification squad, you know, and then, you know, whoever gets the best result will like win a prize and gets my hat. You know, that's a fair deal. That's giving anxiety, not ASMR. Or maybe, yeah. I used to be anxious, but I'm alright now. The old jokes are the best. Yeah, so still a bit more rust up here. So in the old day, this one's been done with a flat grinder with a bit of sandpaper on, but you can tell it's been done by that because I can look at it quite finely and see the little marks it does. So this is why I prefer to. Hello there, Iric. I'm just cleaning off a spear on a spontaneous live stream. I'm trying to keep warm because it's blooming cold out today. Oh, bloody God! What are you doing with the weather? I can't stand still when I do this. It's pretty much impossible. Grinding my spear and getting rid of the rust, and then we're going to fight some Saxons tomorrow. We will beat them and fight them and nick all their gold, and we'll have their lovely women too. There's a spontaneous song I just made up. Remember, that could be a short in one day in the next 5 years. Watch as a mad Viking makes up song on camera. If I did it down here, that would look well bad, wouldn't it? Hello! So you've got to show the spear when you do this. But we'll go back to the other one. That one's not too bad, but this one's rather mucky. Naughty spear. I hope you're alright, Iric. I've not said hello to you today on WhatsApp, but hope you're keeping well. And then Brad says they are all very well made weapons. Yes, they are. Did Vikings use wool for cloth? Yes, they sure did. Wool was one of the most common materials around back in the day. Plus also linen. So linen would do and make your under tunics, maybe if they had under trousers. And then and wool was, they had herringbone patterns and all sorts of patterns with wool. So yes, they definitely had wool. No, that's wrong. That's better. Oh, I can see a raven. Odin's calling. And then Iric, did the spear meet a boar, hence the evil rust? It's bloody hot in London today. Dough! Typical, isn't it? It was lovely and warm yesterday and on Wednesday and Tuesday, but today it's slightly overcast and slightly chilly. Because I was going to sunbathe in my hammock on my balcony, which you can just about see there, look. As I sometimes relax. And but it's too cold. And then after this whole process, I'll have very rusty hands. But I hope you like today's video so far. There is another video out where, one of the reasons why I'm doing this, because there's already a video out where I'm derusting and riveting a spear. But I thought, well, I got to do this job, so I may as well do it on camera. And then Solomon Riemann says, what was the Vikings' staple food? Well, you got meats like beef, you have pork, venison, fish, of course, dried in various forms, or even rotting fish. And then vegetables like parsnips, they had peas, fruits like apples and pears, which are a lot tinier than today's apples, and eels, for instance. So there's a whole multitude of food they had. A lot of grains, barley and wheat. They didn't have corn, because corn was not being discovered yet. They didn't have potatoes, so there's no chips, but you can make chips out of parsnips, and maybe Swedes as well, cabbage. I've had a lot of Anglo-Saxon cabbage stew and it's bloody awful. Then they would have spices, salt and ginger. They would have brought them back from the east, so those were very much desired. And of course, if you can afford salt and spices, I think they definitely had some sort of vinegar or knew how to make vinegar. So if you had spices on your food and salt, you was very luxurious. And no doubt whenever they travelled, they always brought back exotic foods. But then dried meats like sausage, you would have had bacon sandwiches, so I would have been all right. Yeah, and there is a long form video. There's a couple of long form videos where Eggle talks in more detail about the archaeology of food, and they are well worth looking at. And then Iric says 95% of my soft kit is wool. It's a great way to keep warm when you don't want to spend money on gas and central heating. What it is. I mean, I use my big blue overcoat in the winter time and wear that, and I put a belt around me, and I tell you what, I'm lovely and warm, and it's very nice around the house. So wool is sorts of lovely clothing because it keeps the heat in, but it also lets it out in summer, which is a bit of a kind of a contradiction, but it's not. It's very, very true. So back to this. This is definitely improving compared to what it was. But this was very, very brown, of the same colour of this. And you could always tell when you do stop, because I can feel the metal, where this, I can feel the rust on this section and on here. So this would be the last thing I'd do. and at some point we'll take this off. I have to get I could cold chisel it off. That's one way of getting it off. That's how they may have got one of these off. You wouldn't want to really heat it up to get it off, because it will affect the heat treating of the spearhead. And then I know in a comment, Brad, you said that spear's got to be worth 150 quid. Well, yeah, you're probably looking over £100 for a spearhead at least, and 30 to 40 pound for a good spear shaft. And as you can see, you know, I keep going, and it's long, and it is heavy. I can just about use this in battle, but because it's a sharp one, because it's a display piece and one for, you know, displaying, then I couldn't really use it in combat, not unless I ground all this away and welded on a knobbly bit at the bottom. And then at some point I've got to dress it, because if you look, the pointer's gone, so at some point it snapped when it probably hit the floor or concrete. And then Eirik says most of the year they live mostly on veg, very little meat till feasting time. Yes, meat was for the very rich Vikings and Saxons, and the meat was for special occasions to show off your wealth. Yes, when you got guests or a wedding, for instance. And then Solomon Riemann says, how did the Vikings navigate at sea? Well, there's two things they had. They had a little wooden object which had a little stick on it in the middle and little cuttings, and that was like a compass where they could see the sun and work out the direction. But they also had sunstones, which is like a little crystal from Scandinavia, and then when it's cloudy they can put it up to the sky and they'll see where the sun is. So when you know the direction on the compass and you know the direction from the sun, you can align the two like sailors do, and then sail in the direction you want to go and keep a true course. So for instance, you know, if you're sitting in a longship, you won't, you know, you're moving forward, and you know that the shadow from the little post and I will make one day and demonstrate this, is pointing north that way. You know you're going in the direction you want. If you start going off, then you move direction, and then they'll line it up with the sun. Again, there's another video on the channel from Eggle, who's talked about this. Yeah, I love it when you start rusting and you see the rust on here and it starts to powder off. You can see, you know, there's the rust coming off. So it says a few things. It says I probably need to swap my sandpaper for something a bit coarser, and then do a little bit more work. And the problem is, this has been just sitting around my house for like 15 years and not had a lot of use. So when did the Vikings settle in the UK? Well, that would be in the early to mid 9th century. After Lindisfarne in 793, they kept on raiding, and of course the Great Heathen Army came over at some point in, or I can't remember the date now because I get mixed up with dates. So yeah, at the beginning, first few decades of the 9th century, and of course then they spread. And then at some point, you know, there was offered land by one of the Saxons king, and then, you know, they basically massacred the Vikings or the Norse that were over here. And then, of course, the Norse in Scandinavia found out about it and sailed over in mass numbers to get their revenge. And the reason why I'm wearing a Viking hat is because it is cold. So we'll go back up here a bit. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed last night's live stream. I've definitely got to do more live stream just to boost my watch time to get to 4,000 hours. I'm about 1,100 hours away now. Because YouTube are making quite a bit of money out of the channel, and I'm not. I could be spending that on more swords and more spears. Although I did go out today with my neighbours to the tip, and I found 2 very nice wooden shafts for spears, so I thought I'd liberate them. Now, this is always the worst section to do because you got these wings in the way, and they're a little bit different to the other one. that's more straight, but these are more classical design, how they break and kind of curve back. So I prefer this sort of a wing, but it'd be nice if they were a little bit longer. And again, you know, primarily they are used for hunting, but at the same time they're very effective in the shield wall. So, you know, if I'm using a 9-foot spear, I'd have a wing spear every time. Yeah, that's just coming on. And then Solomon Riemann says, did they enlist in the English army? Well, you know, the thing about Norse people, well, you know, perhaps a very small number may have gone to the Saxon side, because, you know, all throughout time, people have always looked after themselves and thought about themselves, and if you get offered a big bag of coin by some Saxon king, you're going to go and fight for him, aren't you? Of course, we know this from the story of Hengist and Horsa, because if it wasn't for Hengist and Horsa, really, then the Saxon age would never have began. And it's quite fascinating when you think about the Saxon age. I mean, compared to the Roman era in Britannia, the Saxons, you know, were probably more successful in a way, but without the mass construction and the organisation, like building roads and having massive towns, because, you know, masonry was a much later development in the Saxon world, but the Saxon era of history lasted nearly twice as long as the Roman era. And then Irit says the Norse were explorers that happened to be armed, so they learnt a lot of information and navigational techniques from their travels. Yes, that's how you learn, and that's how you learn about different weapons and different cultures, and they took that back and that knowledge because the Norse adapted. I'm not sure whether it's trying to rain. It's alright, I'm in an old top. It's got to go in the bin, this old bench top. It's so frayed. It's a frayed end of reality. Reference to Metallica. And this is this is Egil's spear, so this is a very sacred spear to the channel. We will always look after it, and it's about time it got cleaned up. But already that's looking better. But then use a little bit of the budget. This is not an advertising, but this is what I've got currently. GT85, Grand Turbo 85. It was just cheap on Amazon at the time. So we put a bit of that on, and we can see the difference between the beginning of the live stream and the end. And then putting the oil on helps. And then I run my handle on it. I can feel where it needs to improve. Then at some point I'm going to sharpen this up and have it razor sharp. I'm going to make some shields and then destroy them on camera. So other projects, which I think will be very nice. So for example, and Eirik is one of my many brothers. For example, there's no such thing as a Viking sword, because most of the swords they had were knit. Haha, that's very true. I mean, look, you see the videos where I'm holding a sword and somebody say, oh, that's a Frankish sword, that's not Viking. But the Vikings desired blades. You know, they wanted the blades more than they wanted the gold and the silver and the garnets that were on some of the really fantastic stuff, like in the Staffordshire Hoard. Because, you know, the Staffordshire Hoard is made up of a lot of hilts, a lot of pommels, and the mountings and fittings of swords. But where are the blades? Because the blades were thought more valuable. And I think, you know, personally, imagine you find yourself a nice Anglo-Saxon, you know, sax, and it's got gold hilts and garnets, and, you know, motives of animals, and it's amazing, and the top of the elites. I would keep it as it is, but no, because the way the Vikings saw it, they saw the mountings as treasure and something they could bury for another day, but they wanted the blade because they would then fit the blade with new pommels and new cross guards and probably dish them out. So probably in an army, not everybody will get an equal share. So if you're at the lowest end of the army, you know, you may get a few coins. If you're at the top end, you're going to get a few sword blades and a big massive bag of coins and maybe a chest. So it wasn't evenly spread out. I think that's one of the misconceptions people have about, you know, the treasures. When they found treasures and they found, you know, a lot of the stuff they hoarded, they put it in the ground. And it's quite interesting when you look at the Staffordshire hoard and you look at, you know, the incredible amount of finds, but there's things missing. There's like, you know, there's a lot of fragments of helmets, but there's lots of those fragments missing. So I've always speculated that, you know, I think that hoard was much bigger, couldn't say that, and they separated it and buried it in 2 or 3 locations around Watling Street. So you never know, one day they'll find another part of the Staffordshire hoard, maybe buried somewhere else. But of course, that's speculation. So we'll go back to this one. Sometimes when I do it, I like to put the shaft in between my legs so I can get a really good grip, but it looks too funny on camera. And then what I also need to do is get some linseed oil, raw, and then start coating these shafts with linseed oil. So I don't think I've got any. And then Iric says for ships they would have used oak, elm, pine and ash mostly, yes. And then, you know, they would split the logs, so they get a massive log, you know, 2-3 foot wide. They'll split it in half. They'll then split it and quarter it, and then they'll start knocking the planks off. And then they would start, they'd have a clamping system, so you're going down with a side axe to make it into a plank. And then when they wanted to fit it to the boat, they would have a long fire, and they would put the plank over the fire to heat the plank up until the point where it becomes flexible, so that when they attach it to the boat when they're making it, they can clamp it at one end and twist it round. Because when you think about a plank, it's flat, isn't it? I mean, I don't really have a plank. So a plank is flat, but on the boats they're curved, and they curve in and they curve that way. So when they heat up the planks over fire, they soften the wood. There's a reaction with the wood which they would not understand, but they knew the process that heating up the wood. They're not burning the wood, they're just getting it hot and releasing the steam and the chemicals inside the wood and the sap. And then they'll clamp it onto the longship, and then they could twist it, and they'll have a really severe twist, and then they'll clamp it in place. But when they do that, they have about 5 minutes to actually clamp it to the ship and to twist it round, and then to start to form the other side. If they don't do it in 5 minutes, they've got to start all over again with the heating process. And I think that's fascinating. So they had these massive clamps with wooden screws and the ability to clamp the woods onto the longships. And they say it takes about 10,000 man hours to make a longship of an average size. Now, you know, that's a lot of man hours. But if there's 20 of you doing it, I mean, you know, what's that? 500 hours each. So if you've got 40 of you, then you could probably knock out longships quite fast, and they would have been very proficient at knocking out longships. And when I mean knocking out, I mean making them. I mean, not going to get a big mallet and go, oh, we knocked out a longship. Oh, well done, Olaf. Yeah, this end is quite rusty still, so I've definitely got to work there. So we've got Grace Elizabeth Hanson. Hello, William. Said hi, eventually on a live video. So yes, you made it at last. Hooray! Hail the gods and the goddesses. Well, William has made it to a live stream. And thank you for the lovely comments. And then Brad says, didn't they sacrifice their blades in a river or lakes? No, you're probably thinking about the earlier Iron Age, which, you know, you look at the lead 10, you know, blades, so that's probably an earlier practice. Whether they did it in that period, I don't have any evidence of that or recall it. So I think that's a throwback to the Bronze and the Iron Age and the classical Bronze Age of the Scandinavian period, which is fascinating. And then Solomon Riemann says, how many different battle formations did the Viking have? Well, they had quite a few. I mean, the classical ones are a straight line, of course, but they also knew about flanking and also letting the flank go to entice the enemy to come up. And then also what they also have is the boar snout, where they form a triangle of men, and that will be used to bash through the enemy shield wall. And maybe column, but I don't think column would have been used because it's not practical to be in column unless you're going to cover yourself and surround yourself in shields. So that may be more for siege warfare, I would say. So mainly the line and the boar spout, but because we don't have a lot of this evidence, a lot of it's speculation through experimental archaeology when it comes to having to go on camp. And of course, you know, you also have skirmish order as well. So you may have skirmishers in the front, archers, maybe some Dane axemen, archers on the flank behind you as well, and slingers. So I'm just polishing up a spear, if you're wondering what I'm doing. And then Ivet says the Vikings are believed to have focused on shock tactics, cohesion, intimidation. Yeah, so you shout, you scream, you'll bang your shield. Psychology, even though they did not understand what psychology is like we do, they knew the concept that if you shout and intimidate, you know, and pull funny faces at your enemy, the Saxons would be terrified, especially the lower ranks, because they're not fundamentally trained soldiers. They're farmers, they're people that work the land, you know, so they're going to have pitchforks and spears and all manner of weapons, from clubs to mallets and even hammers. And, you know, let's say you're a blacksmith, you may choose to fight with a pair of tongs and a hammer, you know, because you could defend yourself with a pair of tongs if you can control them, and then attack with a hammer. But naturally you want a shield, but not everybody could afford a shield. And then Ivet says, if they sacrificed a sword or weapon to a river or lake, it would have been for Tyr. Yes. And then William Hanson says, what type of spear is that? Well, this is a wing spear, and it's used for hunting, but also it's really useful in the shield wall. And then you have another version which has bigger wings here. So, but you can't fight with two. It's a double-handed weapon. So let me just go over here without tripping over. So when you're fighting with one, and you can see I've got to stand quite a long way back for it to be effective, and you know, you'll be trying to get into the heads, and then what will also be happening is that your eyesight is going in this direction and this direction. So you may see somebody, let's say over there, and he's just opens up his spear, so you go bang like that, and you do the same again over there. You see somebody, and then you'll be having to go at the feet as well. But in reenactment terms, we don't fundamentally do that. Yes, we do. If we see an opening, we'll do that, but we don't go for the head and we don't go for the lower leg. So anything below the knee, we don't go for. But they would have gone for the legs and the knees. And there's lots of accounts and lots of grave finds of bodies that have damage in the lower legs and the upper legs and the knees from spears and arrows. So that's quite well known in the medieval world. And don't forget to give it a like and share the video and all our videos. Yes, I was saying, what we need to do is organise a Northworthy notification squad. But every time they see a video, well, I mean, I'll have to try to get the Discord working again, but I don't really understand Discord. So Brad says, how hard do you hit them in reenactment? Well, not that hard. You can do it too hard if you're not careful, and also if your spear is very heavy, you can underestimate the spear. So it's just a gentle tap. So, you know, I don't know, you know, just a gentle tap. So not too hard. Because what you don't want, and what you will find, if you're not armoured in, you know, a gambeson or leather jerkin, or especially mail, you just find little dots where the spears landed if they're too hard. And that, of course, is not always a good thing. And now that the spear is getting used, I can start thinking about using it on camera. Just think all the things I could chop. Old shield. If you've got an old shield, you don't want it, and it's knackered, send it to me. I'll smack it to bits on camera. It needs a lot more work yet. But it is getting there. The end is always a little fiddly bit to do because it's so minute in size. Whereas when you got the main section, you got more meat to work with. Yeah, so don't forget, tomorrow we got a really marvellous video out, and it's the story about the death of Ragnar Lothbrok. You can't miss the thumbnail, and I think that's a really amazing video. I'm sure if Eirik is here, he will tell you in the comments how good it is. And then Brad says, yeah, probably Bronze Iron Age. Yeah, I think so. And then Solomon Riemann says, were females playing a part in Viking raids? Well, this is one of those myths and things we don't fundamentally know. If you go to the Vikings TV show, then they had a lot of women fighting as warriors. It kind of makes sense. If you're not married, you may want to go. But then again, also in Viking culture, women fundamentally, trying to get the right words, were there to have children, get married. They would have the keys to the war chest, manage the money. When the man's away raiding, they would manage the estate and the farms. So, but we do know there are a number of graves which kind of demonstrate that they possibly were warrior women. So it makes sense to me that they did. And I know what Egil used to say. There you were, you're maybe a Norseman, and you just enter the Saxon village. The men are away, and you enter a longhouse, and there's a woman with a big knife and maybe another weapon, and she's got 5 children. Now, women will fight to their death to protect their children, and it's a foolish man really that attacks a woman. And don't forget, the Norse would have wanted them more for taking back to Scandinavia. So, there was a commodity to a certain degree. But it's one of those things that's very difficult to speculate on because we don't have the evidence, and because that sort of medieval culture was very male dominated. But then again, you think about Athelflaed, although she didn't fight, she led. And that's a very good example of leadership in battle, because she fundamentally led her armies, and whether she fought and whether she did not fight. And I was talking to a guy from Derby last night. He was a massive fan of Athelflaed, called Tom. So hopefully, he's going to come on the channel and talk about it, and we're going to do a few videos about Derby and Derby history. Because I'm always up for meeting people, and I'm always up for filming with other people. So if any of you guys ever in Derby or passing through, just let me know, and we'll arrange a meet. And I'll say, for an hour or something, whatever. Yeah, sometimes you've got to really get into it. But we'll swap over. So this one here is this is a combat one. So you can tell because it's got a knobbly end for a start. So when you see our spears with a knobbly end, that's because it's for combat, because I don't want to hurt somebody. And then there's also blunt down here. It's no sharp edge. That one not too sharp, but it needs sharpening. But this one's blunt on purpose. So we always have to do this and make sure we clean them up, and especially before you go away to camp. But this one's not too bad because I cleaned this one up last year. But I should have thought about doing them on video really. And then Brad says, how many injuries do you get on reenactment? Well, it depends on the society and the period in history. So if you're going to the times, you know, in the 13th, 14th century, when with the wear armour, they can be quite brutal. And you know, there's always a joke that in those sort of medieval battles, there's going to be at least one broken limb, which is never a good thing. Personally, myself, yeah, I've had a few injuries. I lost my tooth. I had cuts on my knees, but I've also had injuries on camp from being very, very drunk as well. Like one time, I really badly sprained my ankle coming back from a pub after I've had a massive amount of beer. And it goes hand in hand, really. And then, you know, if your kit's sharp, you've got a lot of sharp knives and weapons. So, you know, I've got various scars on my hand from a lot of my saxes and from my axes. You know, I've been close to chopping my finger off once. So, you know, I taught myself to be careful over the years. And then Ivic's saying, just in practice, I personally have clipped both my knees, buggered a toe from dropping my shield. Yes, that's a really painful way to hurt your toe. In fact, you could really break your toe dropping your shield, and especially if you got a 36-inch shield, very painful. And he says adding a strap element eliminated that. Yeah, so if you have a strap on a shield, but I'm used to holding a shield in my arm, so I'm always very careful when I let it go on the ground. But for anyone reading this, tomorrow's video is a real treat. Yes, it is. I think it's a really good video. And I might not put any videos on after it, we'll see. And I think it'll be out at 3 o'clock. And then William Hanson says, did the Saxon, or whatever you are talking about, what did they eat? Well, they eat, you know, a lot of it would have been veg, but if you was a higher class person like me, then I'll be eating more meat because I can afford it. So venison, fish, beef, pork, and wild boar, and then you have, you know, a lot of beans, and I don't know about Brussels sprouts, turnips, cabbage. I've had a lot of cabbage stew because they ate that. Cheese, anything dairy, so they may have had cream, of course, would be very rich in your diet. The whey of milk would have been used, so the whey of milk is from the process of making butter. That would have been fed to infants and the elderly, so it would have been you know, not a rich diet. If yours an average Saxon or Viking, then your diet would have been very veg orientated. I mean, a longhouse must have stank in the morning after all the farts. But there are some long form videos on eating which go into it in more detail, because it's such a massive subject on its own. At some point, when I get myself, you know, a little bit more sorted and I start buying more things, then I'm going to start buying the utensils and a cauldron. I've already got the ironwork to have a fire. And then Sam Stapleton says, I made it, brother. I'm at work though. Oh, well, you know, just going to have a, you know, half an hour break. I think you work hard and you definitely deserve it. You can tell your boss that. You can tell Braggy the Viking from England says, I've been working very hard, boss. Can I have half an hour break? He said, no, get back to work, Sam. In a Texas accent. And then Irish says, hey, hello, Sam. And Sam is a fantastic blacksmith. When we get to 15,000 subscribers, you will see the amazing items he sent me. And when I remember, I'll send you the video and I'll send it to Eric so you can both have a little preview. And then Brad says that Sam Stapleton, you made that spear. No, not made this spear, but he's made another little javelin head and a few arrows for me. Oh, I just gave it away. Just forget what I said there. You probably will do. And then William Hanson says, will you ever do a Faroe Islands history video? Oh yeah, I will. There must be some folk tales from the Faroe Islands, so I would look to do some research in that. And I would definitely like to visit the Faroe Islands. I mean, is it easy to visit the Faroe Islands? I mean, would you meet me for a beer or coffee? And perhaps show me around a little bit. Yeah, so Sam Stapleton has made a little miniature crossbow. You could share it on the community post, Sam, because as subscribers you can create a post and put it on the page, and I have to approve it. It's a new feature from last year on YouTube, but it's made this little fantastic crossbow which sits in your hand, and I think it's awesome. It really is. And it does make you think whether, you know, whether they made miniature swords, miniature sea axes, because making things in miniature is such an old tradition when it comes to crafts. We see this a lot in the 18th and 19th century when furniture makers would make miniature furniture to demonstrate what they could do. So it does make you think whether, you know, and we certainly know in the Roman era, you know, they had miniature toys of you know, of gladius and the, you know, and shields and so forth. So it does make you think. So Sam Stapleton says, and you know, the miniature crossbow I showed you, me and my daughter started last night, went through the apple, hit the wall, bounced back, and damn mirror stuck in my daughter's leg. Oh, bloody hell. Right, she's all right. Yeah, it does show you though, a little crossbow, very powerful. Yeah, Sam Stapleton said you could soak the spearhead in vinegar and it will remove all the rust, but you have to re-oil it or the rust is back one day. Yes, I do have actually in my garage a big vat of white vinegar, and it's got stuff in there. It's been in there like a year now. I need to go and get access to it and empty it out. But to do that, I'll have to take it off the shaft. Well, what happens when you put a spear with the shaft on in rust? The rust will soak up into the shaft, and then your shaft will go orange. So that's the last thing you want, because I've done this with a couple of axes and I paid the lesson where I've had to make a new handle. So a fascinating tip, but don't put wood into a vat of vinegar. And that's such an old method for de-rusting, it really is. But I've also experimented with electrosis, where you have a car battery and you have some water with soda crystals, and you have a positive and a negative, and you tie one to your rusty item and another to another metal item, and that will create a chemical reaction, and that also actually de-rusts metal, and it's quite a fantastic way to do it. But I like to have a go at electroplating in the future, and buy some silver water and gold substitute water and actually plate some of my nice jewellery. Yes, and I sent the little crossbow to Iric to see, and he said it was fantastic. So Sam Braggy showed me the mini crossbow. I love it. Yeah, you know. But they're all on about banning crossbows in the UK, or either that or developing a license. And I think it's a very bad thing if they ban crossbows, because more people in the UK are killed by hammers and knives. And if they ban crossbows, then how long will it be until they ban the bow, and then they ban the spear and the sword? So, you know, we need to oppose that, and I do have to make a video about it, because even though I don't have a crossbow, I want a medieval crossbow, and I don't want it to be banned, and I don't want it to be under a license, because it's having to go at archery. A lot of people have crossbows because they're into target shooting. You know, they don't go around like the very small, very tiny percentage of people that have done with a crossbow and kill people. You're more likely to get stabbed and attacked by a crossbow, or die in a plane crash. And then Brad says, you have to get used to all this moles. Everyone's farting, all the animals in the house. Well, you do. I had a friend of mine called Smokey, and he was absolutely terrible at farting. And whenever I stayed around his house, I slept on the lounge. But I tell you, by the time you got to the morning, you could smell the farts from upstairs. With the travel down south, he was very well known for it. And I used to sleep in a tent, and in between him and Moses on the floor, and they'd both be farting all night, and it was a terrible experience. So I quickly got my own tent. But I remember one time on camp, when we went a day early to get another night of beer drinking in, a guy turned up with his dog, and the dog came in a tent and couldn't cope with the smell and kind of collapsed. And then I think Moses had to push the dog out. And then about a minute or two later, it revived itself, and the owner came in, put his head in. What you done? Oh my God! It says, he put his head in the tent to say, "What you done with my dog?" And as soon as he put his head in the tent, he realised that, you know, these guys have been drinking too much beer and eating the wrong food. Have been farting all night, and he was terrible. He had the worst wind ever. Well, we're going to give that a spray. That's them done for tonight, because that's a bit more progress. That's good. My spear in my foot. We'll go back to this for a little bit. This needs de-rusting. Yeah, I just neglected my tools over the years, so they all need working on. I hope that's not a really noisy noise. And I did use this in today's video, but my wood horse either needs redoing or remaking a brand new one. I think I might be able to salvage it. You'll see in the video, I got to the end of it and it started to like give way on me, and it's only got 2 legs at the moment, and it should have 4 legs. But I managed to wing it. I managed to wing it for the video. Yes, we've got a few more combat-based short videos out tonight whilst this is going live, so do watch out for them. Because I'm now editing on my PC, I'm definitely improving the short videos, and some of the thumbnails can be slightly over the top, but I'm just experimenting with making better thumbnails. That's what the professional people do on YouTube with their short videos. They have professional looking thumbnails, and I think they're a little bit better, well, a lot better than what we've been using. But as always, you never stop learning in this game. Let's see how many more comments. Oh, that was probably 1 or 2. Yeah, so lots of laughing from Sam Stapleton. And then Brad's reacted to your comment. I hope she's all right. Yeah, I've done that. In my left knee has had so many axes and swords in it, I'm surprised I can still walk. Well, it's getting dark. I'll have to go in a minute. It's getting too dark. Luckily, the tip didn't hit, so it just stuck in. Well, that's not too bad then. And Sam says, I have my notifications turned on and never get notified for his live streams. I don't know why. Yeah, has always been a massive problem on YouTube, to be fair. And then Brad says, just buy antique weapons, you can keep them. Well, that's true to a certain degree, but if, for instance, you buy yourself an antique revolver, and that revolver can fire live bullets, then you still need it under a firearm certificate, which is now trying to combine with shotgun and firearms together. So there's a little bit of a misconception when it comes to having an antique weapon, and you know, if you're going to have an antique revolver and not shoot it, then you'll probably get away with it. But if you want an antique revolver, so for instance, if I was doing the American Civil War and I wanted to buy a 1859 original Springfield or an Enfield musket that fires, I'd have to have it on a shotgun license. And then Sam says, here's the best for answering back for your comments. He has always commented on every comment I've done. Well, yes, I do try to read all your comments in the live stream, but I think it's so important, and I do try to answer all the comments in the videos as well. But I just think it's important when you're doing a live stream that you do, especially when we can, and they're not like going through like millions at a time, answer your comments, because they're so important. You're taking the time to watch, you're taking the time to comment, so I could do the decent thing and the honourable thing and actually reply. And then William Hanson says, what time did they use those spears? Well, those spears will be from, you're looking, 6th to the 11th, 12th century. But the more for the Saxon and the Viking era. So, classical, you're looking 7th to round about 1066. And probably post 1066 as well. You could use them to fight post Normans as well, if you're like rebelling as Saxons against the Normans. Well, that's coming up a lot better. I know you probably got, it's getting a bit dark now. So that's another one working on. I mean, I've got that many tools. I mean, I've lost count of how many axes I've got. I've lost count of all the hammers. Eventually, one day, but I want to do a video for Sam Stapleton demonstrating and showing off all of my hammers. It's probably over 100, because I got left-handed hammers, I got right-handed hammers, I got different weight hammers, I've got hammers for specific jobs. I've got hammers that I've made, hammers I've converted. So yeah, so that's good. And then Solomon Riemann says the lighting is fine. Yeah, we're still okay for a while, which is good. Because the more I do, the better we're off. So I got another axe here, which is not too bad. I mean, when you look at the Bayeux tapestry and you look at the Anglo-Saxon axes, then this fan shape was often used for tree felling. So that's quite a nice classical shape of an axe. There's so many different designs. It's really incredible, really. And then at some point I put a leather grip on the end, and I use this a lot for chopping things. It's a good axe, this was, but it needs it's not very sharp. And when I sharpen something, I sharpen it because I spent so long when I was an engineer on grinding wheels. People will come up to me, oh Andy, can you sharpen my axe for me? Oh yeah, no problem, leave it there. I'd go and sharpen it, and it'll be razor sharp because I'd hone it and go full into detail. So I've got a lot of experience when it comes to making things sharp. It's a useful skill to have. And then you could actually do a little bit more work and cut in and make it a little bit more classical in shape, and put a taper there and a taper there would make it more classical. But it's just a nice felling axe. What I used to use it for is a woodworking axe. So let's have a look at this, go back to your comments. So can you tell us a story about the berserkers? Oh yes. I can't think of one right now. Let's have a think. Berserkers. I mean, they do speculate whether the man from Stamford Bridge, the lone axeman, whether he was a berserker, because they do speculate that in history, but I don't think he was. But I'll have to do some research and find some classical tales. I mean, the one I do know of is the one where Egil Skallagrimsson is fighting a berserker called Lejot. But within that whole concept of that story, there's a lot of poetry, because Egil was well known, not our Egil, but the famous Egil Skallagrimsson, which is where Egil got his name from. He was very well known for poetry and verse. So in between the duel, he was spitting out verse, and then Lejot, the berserker, was spitting out lines of poetry in between the fight. And I think that's quite amazing. There's actually, if you go on, if you type in Eggle versus Lajot on the channel, you'll find that video from Neil Sigmundson, and he does a really good telling of that story. So we got a comment to this from Milo Van Makovic, 4435. That's a great spear. I like it. I will forge some in the Viking Slavic spears in the future. I would very much like to see some of them, because I'm always curious about, you know, how different cultures had different designs for their weapons. And, you know, if you are a blacksmith, we'll have to talk and, you know, have a chat. So we've got a commentator from the Belfast, Martin Brown. That's my job tomorrow, cleaning weapons, laughs out loud. Oh, I'll just come on a live stream and do it. You know, we could do it together. We could, you know, you can actually collab and live streams where you can appear. I've never done it on the channel. I keep meaning to try to get Iric to come and do one. And then Grace Elizabeth Hanson or Williams says, I am very familiar with my own stories here where I live. Yes, so there must be quite a few stories from the Faroe Islands. So I've been doing quite a lot of research recently. I'm building up a database of stories to tell, where what I'm doing, I'm creating the headline of the story, the video title, the thumbnail title, and then having the story written up so I can read the story, and I'm learning those stories. So I think I'll have to, when I finish this, go to my project for historical stories and create another subheading for the stories from the Faroe Islands. But then again, we've also got Shetland as well, and Orkney, which I think equally need to be covered. But I don't think so far we've ever told a story from the Faroe Islands. It's a shame, but leave it with me. We will cover all those stories, because I still want to, on the channel, over the next 5, 10, 15 years, tell as many folk tales as I can, and preferably not ones that I've already told. But, you know, I can literally tell you folk tale after folk tale now on camera, because I've remembered so many of them. And, you know, I love my folk tales and stories. I wish they got more views on the channel, I really did. Because when you publish a story and you put your heart into it and your soul, when you get 50 views, it can be disheartening. I mean, you can see why a lot of people give up on YouTube, but, you know, it's about having another go. Maybe working on your intro hook, maybe working on the thumbnail better, learning the story a little bit better, learning how to present your story, how to be more narrative and more inspiring on camera. So all these things add to the storytelling aspect. I think we've done quite well so far. We do have a lot of stories. There's a lot of animal stories, because I think they're fantastic. And a lot of these stories from Sweden, Norway, Denmark. There's a few from Ireland. There's a few Scottish stories. I think there's one from Wales. A lot of English folk tales. There's a couple from France. There's, I think, 2 or 3 native Indian stories from America. There's one Japanese folk tale in Boshi and the Giant, and it's a marvellous story which I know off by heart. So, and then there's a really amazing channel called David Heathfield, but he's only on like 2,000 subscribers, and is a fantastic folk teller of stories, and he really deserves to be much bigger on YouTube. So, and he tells folk tales all over the world, but he also has people come and tell folk tales. I mean, it's one of the channels that I subscribe to. So yes, so there must be, yeah, I will do some research on the stories from the Faroe Islands, and I'd love to go there one day, but I don't know how you get there. And then Brian Hanson says, the clock is the same in the UK and the Faroe Islands. Oh, well, that's cool. So it'll soon be dark. And then Martin, the Belfast Viking, says, long story short, I've noticed you on, but I'm in the middle of feeding the cat, so I have to run. Just do run. I was out dumpster diving last year, and I found like 6 months worth of brand new cat food. I sent it to the Cats Protection League and they was most grateful. Nothing wrong with it, it was all brand new cat food. Yeah, I got this just in case any Saxons come round, because then they can have my axe, literally. But it's a bit wobbly on the head. And then I need to go now, bye, so take care, William. I will be going in a minute, it's getting too dark and I've got to get my dinner because I'm starving. I've washed my hands, they're very, look how rusty they are. But no, this has been a really good live stream. I'm doing some filming tomorrow, so there's a chance I could do a live stream tomorrow as well. So we'll see. And then I'll try, because I'm trying to get back into live streaming just on a more regular basis. But no, I'll be here for a few more minutes yet. Let's have a go at this big saw. And how am I going to hold this? This is a very big saw, but this needs working on. I used to buy these at car boot because I love old tools. But I've not used it for many years. Oh, I can smell the rust coming off of that. Yeah, that's improving. Hey, I might go down the pub next. I have a beer. I think I deserve it after another good week of work. Let's spray this old saw up a bit. We'll start the treatment. Let that soak in. There we go. That'll be fine for 19th century reenacting. They don't make the saws like they used to. They really don't. You know, the wooden handles on old saws are amazing. And we'll just spray these again. That's that one sprayed. We'll spray that one. And then Sam says, you're lucky 95 over here. Oh, right. This is 85, but yeah. I normally use WD-40, that's the best one. We'll just do this javelin head. This was an experiment in painting my handle, but I don't have authentic paint, so this is like in a matte paint. But I'm going to paint it blue next and put some nice little stripes on it. It's a little bit bendy, so I might experiment in heating this up over a fire and trying to straighten it. As you'll see, it's not mega straight, is it? But you know, if it's the only thing you've got, you're going to use it, aren't you? I just got the helmet down here, wait a minute. And give that a spray. I'm just trying to get to 90 minutes and then I'm going. I'm still here for a few more minutes. There we go. In fact, we'll give this a bit of a wipe over. I'm polishing my helmet now in the dark. Don't tell anybody. I did notice on this helmet that this rivet is starting to get loose. So I'm going to have to get another rivet and rivet that back on. Another job on the camera. But I'm thinking now, anytime I've got a job to do, I'm going to film it from now on. When it comes to my medieval kit. Well, I'm at the point where I'm going to say good night because it's getting too dark. So we'll see you again in the next live stream.